Still a couple people heading in. While we're kind of waiting to get things started, just want to welcome everyone to today's Ask Me Anything event and panel. We've got some phenomenal alumni to connect you with. We're going to answer some questions that you've sent in, as well as some questions you might have as we go along. So this event is really meant to kind of bridge the gap between the academic experience and then your transition into your professional roles. And it will give you some really unique insight into our College of Business alumni. We're going to go ahead and start with some introductions, including with our illustrious president for the alumni chapter, Lorena.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm glad you're here to join us. My name is Lorena Ornelas Estrada. I am the current president of our CBA alumni chapter. I'm a 2011 MHR major. I'm currently a contracts manager at JPL, and I've been part of the board for about 6 years now. Should I popcorn off?
Yeah, let's go ahead and send it on over to Jason.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining and spending some time this evening with us. Jason Yardley. I am a MBA graduate from the dark ages. 1998 is when I was an MBA graduate. I'm currently CEO of a company called Notion Health. So I look forward to chatting with everybody tonight.
Perfect. And let's go ahead, Annie, let's have you jump on in.
Hi, everybody. My name is Annie Delgado. I graduated in 2020 with a business marketing degree, and I also obtained a minor in government contracts. Today, I currently work for Northrop Grumman in the compliance process management department.
Thanks so much, Annie. Albert, how about you go ahead and take the wheel?
Sure. Thanks, Beth. And before I get started, I do want to say that we're so fortunate to have you here, Beth. I know that you are incoming new CBA Career Center liaison, and I think that we're in such great hands having you here. So we're also happy to have you. So, hi, everybody. My name is Albert. I graduated undergrad in Science, Technology, and Society, where I focused on artificial intelligence and blockchain. I also did a minor in computer information systems, closer to home for a lot of us at the College of Business Administration. Following that, I then completed an MBA. I currently work at the Federal Reserve, developing various technologies. And it's been terrific serving as a civil servant, and I very much look forward to hearing a lot of your questions once we open this up to the forum. Beth, back to you.
And Giovanni, let's go ahead and have you step in next.
How's everyone doing? My name is Giovanni Trujillo. I graduated 2023, so not too long ago, but I did not stop, and by the time I graduated, I was already halfway through my MBA. So the beauty of that is that I am a freshly minted MBA as of mid this year. So I finished my last class, and that was exciting. I am currently one of the corporate executive chefs over at the Yamava Casino. So I'm very, very diverse individual.
Great. And great reference to transitional skills, Giovanni. Excited to hear more about that as we go along. Alex, why don't you go ahead and close out our panel introductions?
Oh, yes, Giovanni. Hopefully, I'll be seeing you on Saturday. They have a Jimi Hendrix cover band at the Yamava. And Albert will let us know if crypto is going to keep going to the moon. We'll see. But good evening, everybody. Alex Barbarian, MBA class of 2020, and then Business Administration undergrad class of 2017, emphasis in MHR. Currently work as a program manager at a Fortune 500 public utility. And I'm also a loan officer and a realtor in the Southern California area.
Perfect. Thank you, panel. And as Albert mentioned, but I did not. My name is Beth, and I am the lead career coach for the College of Business Administration. I work with the Career Center, and although we serve all students, we also liaison with our individual colleges. And I'm very excited to have joined Cal Poly Pomona this year. And I'm happy and excited to moderate this event that's also being hosted by our wonderful Alumni Association. So to get things started, some of the questions that were sent in, first and foremost, what was life after graduation for you? Who wants to jump in?
I can go ahead and take that. So, life after graduation for me, I actually had a job lined up for me after graduation. So, the current company that I work for now, Northrop Grumman, I started off with them as a buyer for the aeronautics sector, which I still currently work in, but in a different role. So, life after college was also very different because I graduated in 2020. So, that was a different environment to go from working every day in person to working fully remote online and adapting to that sort of culture and learning how to navigate work from home life, as I had never had that experience, along with learning how to network within the company. Because as you grow into your different career paths, you obviously want to move up in the company or make yourself known. So learning how to navigate that was really important. But I had a really good situation after college, so I had a positive experience.
I could jump in after that. So for me, life after college was actually it. There wasn't many, how to say, big transitions because I was already working, right? I was already doing accustomed to the 40, 50 hours of work week and doing a full-time job. The only thing that actually happened was that I had a big relief, and then I went straight into the MBA. So I didn't want to stop just because, I had graduated. But what did happen was that as soon as I finished, I transitioned into a higher position, which in my boss's mind kind of gave me in his point of view. As soon as he heard like accountant, like, oh, okay, cool, he sees stars in his eyes. And he's like, why don't you move into this particular position, which was equivalent to a $20,000 raise plus bonus on top of that. So that did help me, you know significantly, trying to pay off my student loans and everything that came with it. So it was a very positive experience, but at the same time, I had to learn how to um, manage the new role, right? Especially being going into that MBA. So it was something a little bit that kind of went hand in hand with uh, learning at the graduate level. It's definitely a lot more stressful, but also kind of fun.
Very nice. And Annie, not to put you on the spot, but I know you mentioned that like you had a job lined up. Like,
Yes.
what were some things that you did that kind of helped get that into place before you graduated?
So definitely, I was very involved at Cal Poly. I was part of SLCP, the Society of Law, Contracts, and Property Procurement. They changed the P every time. But I went to school with a goal in mind to study law, and I decided to pivot to government contract management, which I obtained my minor in. But I used a lot of the network and alumni associations and getting involved in that, using the Career Center, using all of Cal Poly's resources to obtain that job. And I actually met my then manager at Cal Poly at a Northrop Grumman event, a hiring event that was brought to me and a couple of others by a former alumni of Cal Poly and also the government contracts minor. So very full circle moment.
Very nice. Did anyone else want to weigh in on like life after graduation before we kind of transition into finding those first jobs? All right, let's just jump right into it. Okay, so how did you, I know we got to hear a little bit from Annie, but how did you go about finding that first job, especially right after graduation?
So I can touch a little bit more on that, give a little bit more details on how I got it. So as I mentioned, the Northrop Grumman or Cal Poly had an event for Northrop Grumman. I met my then manager, but before that, I used a career center to review my resume and make sure that it was ready before actually meeting these managers, and also just putting yourself out there, being open to different opportunities and being flexible on what job you're kind of willing to take, because you have to remember 2020 is a time where people are losing their jobs, people are struggling with the pandemic. So just being able to pivot in any moment and just being receptive to managers and also being respectful. But I think Cal Poly offers a lot of resources that students probably don't tap that much into. So I always highly encourage, anytime I go to any speaking event, to have those students use all those resources that they're already paying for. And not only that, but sometimes your professors know people within industry, or they worked for a company, or just have a very big network. And that was the case for me as well, because we had a lot of speakers that came into our classroom and talked to us about their career and how they started. So that was a way that I built up my network, and just doing a really good job in your interview. And that way, that hiring manager is really impressed and waits for you to finish the summer semester for you to jump on board.
Nice. I love that you're kind of tapped into that idea. Like something I love to share with students and alumni is like you opted into a VIP experience. Like if you opted into a VIP like concert or something, you wouldn't be like, oh, I don't need the free shirt and I don't want to do the like behind the scenes like meet and greet and things like that. Like take advantage of all of those things that are available to you as students and alumni. So many services
Yeah.
we extend to our alumni throughout their entire lives. So absolutely
The
great
career
advice
center
there.
too.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
after school, you get resources, even if you can't find a job or if you need help. The closet, I know that I donated a couple years ago to that. So a lot of resources that Cal Poly has.
Absolutely. Anyone else like want to weigh in on like that first job?
Yes, I'll chime in. So I had a little bit of a different experience, but similar in some senses. So my first, both of the jobs that I obtained or that I've had, and I'll have to say I've only had two in my career. So and both of them were as a result of an internship that I had the opportunity to to have, or I presented myself to. So the first one, my first job was in high school, and but I had some very similar experience for my second job, which was I was a Cal Poly Pomona. So, and what that experience looked like was, it did come with being known, having, networking with your department, with your chairs, with, the faculty, and them knowing me as not just, a student, but like knowing me by name. So, definitely building those relationships with people at school is extremely important and will come into play when opportunities arise that you don't know or you're not aware of. And that's what happened both times. So I'm going to talk about the Cal Poly experience, but just know that my very first job was actually very, very similar. So at Cal Poly, I was a third year, and I wasn't necessarily looking for a job because I already had a job as a result of my first internship, but kind of looking into into what I would do with my major, there was an internship that was brought up to my attention to a few students. Actually, there was about 5 or 6 of us, which was an internship at JPL. And it was supposed to be a 2-year internship, the last 2 years of school. And it was really just because they knew me. I had the grades, I had the GPA that they were looking for, and in the business of administration, side of the house. I interviewed with what I thought was for a human resource position. And I interviewed with a couple of different managers. And lo and behold, the position that I actually landed was not for HR, which was my major. It was actually for business administrator. But hey, it was my, the foot or my foot in the door. So I gladly took it, and I definitely learned a lot from it. So again, it was meant to be a 2-year internship, and after the 2 years, it became it was a little scary because at that time the area that I was working with just was very upfront with me and said, hey, we don't have funding to keep you. So you're going to have to look for, something else. And again, I was reaching graduation. And I knew that the internship was really for 2 years. So, I did get my resume out internally to the organization, to like different, the departments, not outside of mine. And, I was lucky and blessed in the sense that they ended up keeping me. They actually created a position for me. They saw the value and the benefit that, they would have to keep me on, and they actually extended me a full-time position. So my internship actually led to that full-time job. And, I'm still with the company. I have shifted gears one time, but I'm there, 15 years later. So that was my experience with my first job.
Awesome. Thanks, Lorena. I think that kind of transitions too into something folks were interested in. Not only like, how did you find that first job, but like, how did you break into, this person had specifically asked the HR industry, but I mean, I feel like for anyone, like, how did you break into like your industry of choice? Essentially, like maybe that first job wasn't the job that was directly industry related, but like, how did you end up making that transition?
So I'll chime in, and I'm not going to be helpful because I didn't transition into an HR position, but I will say that whatever role you have, and in my case, it was a business administrator role, and it was a blessing in disguise because I would have the opportunity to create a niche that fell within HR, the HR world, within, like using, the job that I was in. So as a business administrator, there really is a whole lot that, that a business administrator does. But, there's the logistics, the finance, like there is some HR, that you can delve in. And in my case, I delved as far as I could into that HR, section. So I will to kind of shape and shift my role to really focus on what I liked, which was HR. By doing, some recruiting events, I was able to, create, and form requisitions, partake in the interview process, so really what an HR coordinator would do, I was basically doing as a business administrator for my organization, for like my specific department. And, I wasn't in HR, but I felt like I was an extension in HR, and the people that I worked with directly definitely appreciated that. So, and they definitely used me. So it was a win-win situation in that sense.
Awesome. Thank you. And Giovanni, if you don't mind, I'm gonna tap you in. Just in part because I know this is a little like off script, but like would love to hear a little bit from you about transferable skills, if you don't mind, having made your transition throughout your job. So maybe if you didn't mind, like kind of how did you kind of make a shift in your career path?
Well, in my career path, right, obviously the cooking skills are those are so essential. But once I started moving up, I realized that that's only a fraction of it. Right? Actually, that's maybe a quarter of it now. What was really important was everything you started learning in your operations class, your human resources class, your organizational behavior class. How can you manage people? How can you talk and really handle all the diverse personalities when it comes to your direct reports? And that's very important. I manage over 130 individuals, and each one is a different personality, right? And you have to be able to manage all that. Now, what was beautiful about it was that, especially, and I always go back to my organizational behavior class, and I have that book on my desk because I refer to it constantly, right? Especially when I do interviews for other jobs, and they ask me, well, what's your leadership style? It's like I always say, it's like, it's based on the concepts and methodology of organizational behavior. Like, how can you motivate people to do what it is that you need them to do? And all the projects and everything that I did in those classes really just kind of like made those transferable skills, um, though that were once soft into now hard skills, right? Being able to conduct those one-on-ones with individuals, uh, how to say, um, crisis escalation, de-escalation, right? How to um, how to just manage individuals. That all of that just came into play, and honestly, I even now I still refer to it. Um, it's my Bible on my desk. So that's usually I guess that's my 2 cents on that one.
Awesome. Yeah, that conflict management. And so what's that book that you're talking about? Just so we can all like jot it down.
That one's uh man human resources management and organizational behavior leadership.
Hey, awesome. And anyone else want to kind of like weigh in as far as like whether it's breaking into an industry or like how do you shift gears in terms of your career?
I can go into the gears a little bit, that not only because I recently got a manual transmission car that I'm shifting gears with, but also understanding that where you start does not dictate where you're going, any more than what you study determines what you master eventually at the end of your career, right? So shifting gears is not as simple as just applying for jobs on LinkedIn. It's not as simple as going to an AI tool and having your resume be customized and mass emailed to a bunch of different jobs, different careers, and going with whichever one sticks. I think that shifting gears is very possible, but it takes just as much, if not more, dedication into learning as you did in college. So that's kind of what I did. My degree was MHR. And although that's a rather general degree, I pretty much thought I was going to go into HR in some capacity. I was thinking about getting my APHR and my PHR, moving up the ladder, and then seeing what happens next after I got my foot in. The jobs did not work in that direction. So got hired at Cal Poly at the career fair, which was a huge blessing because that company no longer recruits the same way anymore. So that was good to have during that blip of time. But there are plenty that still do. And the ones that do, they know why, because they're getting that level of scrutiny that they would not be able to receive otherwise in terms of analysis of the individual. So I moved into real estate, engineering, environmental, and strategy. Now, the only job that I've had that coalesces with my education is strategy, but I got it 9 years after I got my degree. The other jobs I've had have all been stuff that I've had to pivot and shift gears on the fly. And in terms of, there were always something related to it. It was a project management or leadership quality that they wanted, but nevertheless took a lot of independent study. So, we've never been exposed to as much information as we are today. It's just being selective about filtering it down to what you need. You can teach yourself anything. And I mean, Cal Poly is an amazing place to master that skill. But if the opportunity presents itself, you need to get a certification outside of your area of study. It's possible with the internet.
Sorry, Alex, can I tap you for like a little follow-up?
Oh,
Um,
yes, of course.
can you describe like what are the feelings in those moments when you're like shifting gears? Like how did you tackle like uncertainty or like self-doubt or like did you just have like full like lean in hard and like just move forward with lots of confidence? Like what's your advice to folks who are like kind of balancing a lot of emotions with those kind of changes?
Yeah, very, very relevant because I think that, in cases of uncertainty, we turn to others we love and trust and look up to, right? For many, it might be siblings, parents, friends, professors, right? Anybody in your community that you have access to. For those who are first generation students, oftentimes, as well-meaning as their parents are, they may not have the requisite experience to provide you with the right answer in the right context, right? So they would oftentimes, as in the case of my experience, convince you to take the more conservative path, say something why rock the boat, right? And let's just kind of, it's not a bad place you're at. And that's where you have to really align with what's my long-term vision, right? Everything has to have a longer-term approach. I don't see the value in just hopping jobs just for a five to $10,000 salary increase that have nothing to do with each other at all, right? Either that you're going to be at the same company and you're going to do a bunch of different things at the same company, or you can do the same thing at a bunch of different companies. That's kind of what I've seen as the success strategy. If you keep switching careers, you'll always be entry level at some point, and that's not a bad thing for the first half of your career to figure out what you like. But if you're, past the point where you're near retirement and you're still switching entry level, it didn't really add up to do what it was supposed to. But in terms of the psychological factor, which I think you were talking about, Beth, it was always relying on the fact that I've learned how to learn. I can possibly power through based off the success I've had in the past. And for those who would say I've never had success in the past, you taking the step to come here is a small measure of success. You going to college is as a part of building your success. Passing the classes you did last semester was a success. So whatever that is, taking that energy and pouring it into that new subject, which is not going in blind, right? Just like trying to go research it to the best of your ability and having faith in your work ethic that you've developed at Cal Poly, where you're not going to get it the first time, you might not get it the second time, but you probably will the third time, right? So it's a good way to look at all these interesting new knowns.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else wanting to weigh in kind of when it comes to like shifting gears or even like another question that was kind of thrown out was like, did you have a plan B? Like what was your plan? Go ahead, Jason.
Well, I can say actually my whole career has been a plan B. What I started with was not at all where I ended up by any means. In fact, if I go all the way back, when I started college, my undergraduate was at UCLA, and then I came to Cal Poly for my MBA program. I walked onto the UCLA basketball team, thought for sure I had a whole different path ahead of me, and blew my knee out 3 weeks later. And with that, life became Plan B. So I needed a job and went down and got a job at the local hospital as a registrar in the admitting department. And 30 some years later, here I am as CEO of a healthcare company. So that entire path and plan was not at all what I anticipated. I went straight from undergraduate to graduate, like a number of other people did on here. And that whole time, I kept working in hospitals or in healthcare, just mostly because I needed a job and needed to keep working along the way. And I was frankly kind of surprised when I graduated from the MBA program. I had never really thought about the level of experience I was building up along the way, and so I encourage people to understand that whatever you're doing today, you're building a set of skills and experience and other things that will help you in moving to that next role along with your education. And I was able to then join a consulting firm, E&Y, Ernst& Young, back in the day, and I then spent 10 years in consulting. And so that whole path was not necessarily the path that I had planned on going into consulting. And frankly, I couldn't believe that anybody was willing to pay me to hear what I had to think. Who at a hospital is going to pay me for what I had to think? I was this young kid, I felt like, kind of going through the process. And so had a great career in consulting, and then saw where in healthcare, this whole idea of outsourcing and starting to manage processes and departments for hospitals was starting to take over, and was able to join a company where I stayed with for 8 years. I was able to join as a sort of a lower level management person. And 8 years later, I was president of that company. Just I had had a ton of opportunities that was provided by the owner of that company. And then later on, we sold that company literally back to one of the consulting firms I'd worked for. And then that opened the door to being able to be CEO of other companies. So this is now the third time that I've been a president CEO of a company. A month ago, we actually sold this company for almost $700 million, and we close that on Tuesday. So it's kind of an exciting time and stuff. But I can tell you, like after coming out of consulting and going into that first job where I remember walking through the doors and there were 50 people on the other side of those doors, and I was now going to lead that group and then think, oh my God, why are these 50 people ever going to follow a single word that I say? And so back to what Giovanni had said, those soft skills, really having relationships and communications and being able to tell stories and have a vision that you can communicate and get people to understand where they play a role in that vision is so incredibly important. And it's not always the things that you learn as a part of your coursework, but often it's a part of what you learn as being a part of clubs or as just being in your friend group or whatever it might be, that the more you can work on those types of things, and no matter what level of career you're in today, can really help benefit you later on.
Perfect. And I think we definitely want to circle back with some follow-up questions, Jason, regarding like CEO, C-suite, kind of
Sure.
how to prepare for that. Before we circle back to Jason, anyone else want to weigh in as far as like for folks who are like plan B or like backup items, things like that? Anyone else have something they want to weigh in on that one?
I do want to say that I think it's completely okay to pursue your plan B. Oftentimes, life turns out surprisingly wonderful with the plan B. I think oftentimes folks have this vision on what they'd like to do, as well as what they'd like to pursue or succeed through. And it's just a bit hard so many times, and that's okay. So having that plan B may somehow and oftentimes miraculously become the best option it'll turn out. So, of course, the lesson to this is likely to have a plan B oftentimes and be prepared for failures in life. In fact, failures in life are incredibly common and normal and repetitively happen all the time. So having that plan B is always a great backdrop. And really, if you do end up going on to the path of a plan B, you will realize that that was probably the best decision that you end up making a lot of the times.
And I'll just chime in here real quickly. Not so much for the plan B, but allow yourself to fall into roles. So many times, and I can say that that has happened. That actually happened to in my last the role that I currently have. That was not, I never saw myself as a contract manager. That's not something that I planned for. That wasn't even my plan B or C or D. But, it just so happened that, I was looking for another position. I communicated that to my circle. They knew, and they were very supportive and identifying positions that I didn't see myself doing, but they're like, no, you would be great in this. You should definitely take advantage of it. So, allow other people to create opportunities for you and let yourself fall into that and at least try to take that advantage of that situation.
Really great thoughts, everyone. And great kind of exploring the idea of like embracing failure and not always necessarily having a specific emotion attached to plan B, C, D, or like the unexpected plan. That's great. Jason, circling back now, you kind of talked about your career path, but like what specific tips do you have for folks who are really interested in those C-suite roles? Like what can they do to kind of prepare and work their way towards that? We also had some interest in like what made you switch from political science to business. And I feel like in general for the group, after we've kind of heard from Jason, this is a great time too. We've got some people who shared like they feel stuck in positions and they want to like market and reach for something better, like how to do that. So starting with you, Jason, though, go ahead.
So a couple of comments about that. One, in consulting, as just a a part of the career ladder, I thought we had something that was really good that was in place, and it helped me through the rest of my career. And that was simply that if you wanted to be promoted to the next level, then you needed to demonstrate you were performing at the next level normally for a year, and then you would qualify kind of to be promoted into that level. So don't get hung up on the year part of that. Don't get hung up on the, what the time frame is or anything else. But I think the lesson there is demonstrate that you're performing at the next level, right? That's one component of it. Another component of it is simply becoming indispensable. Be the person that when the leadership team is thinking about who's the first name that comes to mind that's just a hard worker and dedicated and then I want to call upon, you want to be that name that comes to people's minds. And I can give you an example right now. We have an incredible gentleman. His name's Derek Black. He's also a Cal Poly graduate who is in our business analytics and business information group. And we all fight over who gets to have Derek working on our thing because we know that Derek's a superstar. Be that superstar, right? And you can demonstrate that. And it's not just the hard work; it's the communication. It's how you put yourself out there. It's the deliverables that you put together. It's the thoughtfulness that you show in different things. So there are definitely a number of ways that you can stand out, and that helps. And then your performance, of course, has to kind of mirror and go along with that. And for me, the path to CEO was working my way up through management. For others, the path to CEO is being an entrepreneur, starting something that then grows over time. I've had the great benefit throughout my career of being a part of a couple of different groups too. YPO, which stands for Young Presidents Organization. Today, I'm a part of a group called Vistage, which is a group of other CEOs and such. But I think that it goes a little bit to the mentorship, but then also progressing careers, that you find the people that are out there, whether it's in your company or it's in your market or it's in your industry or what have you, that you want to emulate and that you want to sort of act like and trying to maybe achieve some of the same success. And it doesn't have to be everything about them. It can be components of them. Gosh, I want to be able to speak and present like that person. I want to be able to lead like that person. I want to understand numbers like that person does, or put together even a PowerPoint like that person does. I think that as you find those pieces of what you ultimately want to sort of round yourself out to be able to be in your profession, there are so many people out there as well that can help. I'll put a shout out there for the mentoring programs also that are a part of Cal Poly and the People Grove app, and that you can go out there. There are many alumni who have put themselves out there to be mentors. So I know I shifted that a little bit into the mentorship piece, but just there are so many different ways to develop your career and develop your skill set that then positions you for the next level and helps you then actually be able to demonstrate that you're really performing at that next level. Be the person that everyone wants to promote and have working for them, and be the person that others at some point can see working for. Don't know if that covered everything there for you, Beth.
I think you did a pretty good job. Can I ask a little bit of this might be like a hot point follow-up
Sure.
question? Because I think this is something that comes up in discussion. I feel like even in career type videos and streamers and things like that, this happens a lot. Where it talks about operating, how much you are willing to operate outside of your role without being compensated for work outside your role. So what do you feel like is the balance with that as you're trying to work your way up, but not maybe overreach or create a problem there?
Yeah, well, okay, so a couple other things. In our organization, any organization, there's one other piece of guidance I guess I would give, and that is no one is going to be a better steward of your career than you are. So you have your plan. You put yourself out there. If you want to be able to, if you want to promote yourself or you want to move on to the next level, you also need to let your supervisors and managers and such know along the way. I can tell you that for the people who, I'll go back to that Derek Black example. Derek's not trying to go do a bunch of other roles that puts himself out there, but he is great at what he does. I know if I get numbers from from Derek, those numbers are right. I know that the materials he put together are going to be amazing. I know that if I have a follow-up question for him, he's going to know this kind of backwards and forwards. So in that example, he's not trying to do so much more than what is in his role, but he's just so good at it and so thorough that he's the person you want to call upon. And in the instances where that individual has been provided other opportunities, they've shined, right? And that momentum builds upon itself over time. And then, look, we all have a reputation, love it or hate it. There's how people think about us. There's how we present ourselves. And in those cases where you don't necessarily have to go above and beyond where you're trying to do a different role, but just be great at what you do and take pride in what you do and deliver in what you do. It'll be recognized. If you're working for good management, it'll be recognized. And frankly, if it's not, you might not be working for good management. You might want to find a different path anyways, along, certainly along the way.
And to open it up to the broader panel, we were also talking about like, what about when you're feeling stuck and you're trying to like move yourself up? And maybe Jason kind of tapped on that as well, as far as like maybe you're just not in a good management space. But like, what advice do you have for folks, panel, that are feeling stuck and needing to make a change or trying to move up the ladder?
I'd like to start off by answering this question. I think this is a particularly important question in these recent times, as there has been significant technological shifts occurring, particularly around artificial intelligence. Now, of course, I bring up the topic of AI, although there are plenty of other career variations to be considered. I'm going to speak a little bit about AI and just a general shift on technology. For folks that are seeking to stay competitive within the job field, it'll be essential to learn as much as you can, perhaps through micro certification, so you don't feel as though you're falling behind the competition. It may be important to continue moving forward in understanding how to articulate the different technologies that can make you a more effective contributor to a company or an institution. So with that, I think it is incredibly important to stay a lifelong learner. And if you ever feel as though you are falling behind, the great news is that you're always welcome to take up plenty of resources. I know that the Career Center will be able to help set you up with a LinkedIn Learning account where you'll be able to understand different types of topics to make you a higher performing professional.
Yeah, I'll add to what Albert was saying and shift gears a little bit. Is so that what you can do to try to get unstuck, right, from whatever situation you might find yourself in at work. So I have been in that situation. It's not a good situation to be in, and you hear that saying of when it's time to move, when you wake up and you dread going into work, and that can come in very many, like, you can love what you do, but just the people that you work with, it's just not cutting it anymore. Or it can be like vice versa. You love the people that you work with, but the work just isn't giving you that drive anymore to continue with it. I found myself in a situation where I had been in my job that I loved for 10 years. And just unfortunately, like the group that I was around and working directly with changed. And it was just making it very hard for me to continue doing what I did and loving what I did. So I just came to the point where I was like, okay, I have to make the move. And I felt stuck because I didn't really know what to do. But that's where your network comes into play. And I strongly encourage everyone to network and network for the sake of just getting to know people, trying to really build relationships, not network to like, okay, what can I get out of you? Or, how are you going to help me? That's good, but it's nice when you network for the sake of just building relationships and really getting to just meet other people. And just finding, what you have in common and building off of that. So luckily for myself, I love to network. I'm a social butterfly, so I love talking to people. And I had done a lot of that in my 10 years that I was with the company. And, out of, so, it was someone that I downpooled with. So it's, not someone that I worked with directly. But again, they introduced me to opportunities that I hadn't even considered. I wasn't even aware of because I wasn't looking in that area. I was still looking at, okay, if I'm going to move with what I know, with what I'm comfortable with. And that's kind of like where my mindset was going. But again, like just not had I not networked and met people and just, created those, those relationships and, they got to know me and saw things in me that I didn't necessarily, recognize and, and was, really using to try to find, a new position or, a new role that I can fit into. But again, that allowing other people to do that for you and taking advantage of those opportunities when they are presented to you. So, that's again, just going back to kind of like putting yourself or positioning yourself well to when you do feel stuck, there's a way out. There's another door, that will be opened for you. And in my case, it came through like networking.
Nice. And just while we're on the topic of networking, if anyone wants to share kind of like what were some networking that really worked for you that you felt like you had like a really great return on investment on, and like what were some meaningful relationships you maybe developed through your network, as well as, which I think Jason kind of tapped on earlier, like how did you go about finding mentors? And then we'll follow up with some questions regarding certification from the chat.
I'd like to throw in a little advice on that one. Definitely, well, first and foremost, like especially as college students, utilize those resources that are given. You can't stress that enough. Career Center, for example, this last readiness career fair that we just had, right? I mean, I learned something through there, how to utilize LinkedIn. When that speaker came on and he showed us how to like leverage it, and I was like, oh my God, light bulb, it was like, so I actually did try that, and believe it or not, I actually did get a good response. I got a really good response. I got a few responses earlier today from some HR recruiters out in Vegas, right? That were looking at my LinkedIn. They say, hey, you know what? We have an opportunity. Are you interested in it? And they said, well, let's have a conversation. And it went really great. And that was my first attempt at that. And I sent out 10 emails. So definitely don't disregard, those career readiness fairs or any kind of event that will help you, right? Because you never know what you will learn from that.
I would also add that, when one, you'll be surprised when how many opportunities just present themselves to network, whether you're at a dinner with somebody or a group or some other thing. Just never kind of pass up on the opportunity. But the other thing I would say, and I think that Lorraine did a nice job of touching on this earlier, is if you want to get value, then give value. So go into any of these conversations, not just looking to figure out, how can this person help me in my career? How can this person move something that I want or need forward? But instead, what can I add of value to this person? How can I really genuinely get to know this person or really get to understand this person? Because you'll be amazed at what you can pick up and learn from people. I love going on vacations and meeting new people and learn about entirely new things that are out there that I would have never had exposure to. And it's amazing how many doors will open up, whether it's career wise or connection wise, or lead you into something that can be a new hobby or some other thing for you. There's so many opportunities, but so much is going into with the right mindset and going in it with, what can I do to help or provide value to this person, and it will return to you tenfold.
Some really great insight there, Jason. And just a reminder too, everyone, this is a networking opportunity. So feel free to like drop your LinkedIn accounts in the chat. Note that like all the alumni have their LinkedIns at the top of the chat. So we definitely want to all be connected. And I mean, you just never know, like those little connections can mean a lot. I had a really good like mentorship experience. I like to call them micro mentorships, right? There are some folks that we're like having more in-depth mentorships with, and then folks that like just maybe it's like a little blip. Someone made a nice gesture, maybe a mistake on their part, of like just wishing me happy birthday on LinkedIn. And they were in an industry that I was really interested in like transitioning to. And I was like, that shows me that you're open to having a conversation. And so it just followed up with like a, hey, when you have a chance, I would love it if you would take some time to look over my like LinkedIn, and like I'd love to pick your brain. And we had a really great conversation that like spanned a 2-month period. So you just never know, like when that door opens, like take advantage of it and just be a genuine person. It's kind of some of the things I've heard a lot of folks talking about. Okay, we had a question about certifications. Ooh, sorry, something's in my head. So, Mr. Alex, how do you know what certifications should you seek for your respective career?
I'm sorry, just to clarify that, Beth, it's for the expected career. You kind of broke up there.
Oh yeah, sorry. How see this? How do you know what certification should you seek for your respective career? Should you seek a certificate only if a job requires it, or find one you personally feel is necessary?
Ooh, that's a good question. First answer, ChatGPT. Second answer, the CAPM. So, there are certain certifications that are general enough to where you can apply them in a lot of business administration applications. The CAPM is one of them. The APHR is another one. These are entry-level certifications in project management and human resources specifically that don't require you to submit experience requirements. It's just a knowledge exam, and they're very close to their upper-level certifications, the PHR and the PMP. Now, whether it's supposed to be career-driven or interest-driven, that's interesting. I guess it depends on where you're at. If you have a job and you're exploring the possibility of moving to another career, which, like as my previous comment, doing through the first half or so of your career, depending on your personal situation, should be pretty good. Then I would say going off of interest is not a bad idea. You get to learn a lot, and it's a pretty low risk way of trying something new instead of quitting your job and jumping with both feet in, assuming they'll take you. This is a great way to ease into the idea, explore it, and not lose out on a whole lot. But in terms of what it actually will apply to. For example, I'm a musician. I love music. If you asked me what I wanted to do when I went to Cal Poly as a freshman, it was music. And of course, the job prospects are a little less defined for a musician or any other creative profession, right? So, taking certifications in music may have satisfied a personal goal, but might have zero prospects on my career, assuming how my career ended up the way it did. So, balancing the two is absolutely crucial in the sense that you don't want to lose your sense of who you are, especially companies now. They are really bent on getting your whole self to work in ways that allow you to do a lot of fun things. So I have a band at work and we play a lot of the company events. So that's one way I keep the musician part of me alive, but they're not paying me the salary to play music, although wouldn't that be cool? But having that understanding of what I need to do, what I want to do, and just find the balance between the two. Easier said than done, I gotta say. So,
Awesome. But I love that though, because I feel like that's kind of also like hits on the idea of like leaning into your strengths and just the things that bring you joy and like drive energy, right?
yes, they do drive energy, and you need that energy to kind of make the work aspect going. I mean, work is work. It's not all fun. It's supposed to be somewhat interesting and stimulating and providing the purpose to wake up every day because even if we didn't need money, we would still want to do something every day and feel important where we're using our skills. At least some of us would, right? Otherwise, the beach might be calling our name. But even after a while of that, you'd want to feel something that you're doing something useful. And that's where work comes into play. But a word of caution. The certification game has been a competition of alphabet soup. So, what does that mean? Everybody's typing in a bunch of letters behind their last name. Almost their whole LinkedIn profile is like a bunch of things. You don't want to get to the point where you are just collecting them like you would Pokemon cards. It is something that is of a purpose to some extent. Exploratory nature, sure, but to an extent, because first, they cost money. Second, not all of them are created equal. So you want to search out the ones that make sense. It's a whole industry to have these certifications, and some of them might be pay for play and not as rigorous as others. I know in the real estate industry that's very common. You have realtors that are going for these certifications that don't do a whole lot in terms of skill development, but they sell it to you in a way that, oh, it gives you something others don't have. But you got to look a little bit past that vanity and see what it's actually going to do for you.
Nice. Very nice. As we're chat, feel free to drop some questions. We've got just like one or two more from our questions presented beforehand, but there were some questions about grad school. For folks who went to grad school, how did you decide to go to grad school? Like, how did you pick your college? Like, so many questions about grad school. How to grad school?
Hmm.
Can I answer this one even though I'm not officially a panelist tonight?
You
Absolutely.
now are
Go for it.
panelists.
Our former president, Natalie, for the
Yeah.
following.
So just I don't know what background you recent grads have, but I was a FRL student, major at Cal Poly, and one of the things, kind of interestingly enough, the finance professors always drilled into us was, do not go to grad school because it won't pay you back unless an employer pays for it. So that was the thing that they kept drilling into us. And so when I got a job right out of college at JPL, I was a non-traditional student. It took me 10 years to do undergrad, and I was done with school. I said, hooray, I finished my undergrad, I'm done. And then they're like, hey, we kind of like pay for grad school, so maybe go back. So I was dying because I thought I was done. And I took a really non-traditional approach to grad school. I did an AA in business administration. I have a BS in business administration. And the last thing I wanted to do was do an MBA, which is like business administration on steroids, right? Just incrementally more. So I actually looked up and searched for a grad school program that was specific to my career field, which was government contracts. And I was able, through a Google search, was able to find George Washington University, who actually had a program that was specific to government contracts. And I actually called George Washington and I was like, hey, I want to know what your workload is for grad school. In undergrad, they expect you not to work and the workload is heavy. I'm a full-time worker and I want to know what to expect. And so they were able to tell me like, hey, we cater to a lot of busy, students who work here in the capital, and we want to make it manageable for busy professionals to go to school and finish it. So I think what was really helpful for me was being able to find a program that is such a niche within my career path. I'm a government contracts professional. I don't really have a desire to branch outside of that realm. So that's the work perfect for me. All of my electives were MBA program electives. So I did still get the MBA on steroids there. But I would just encourage you, if you're looking into grad school, find an employer that will pay for it. And B, if an employer doesn't pay for it, try to find a program that will set you aside from everybody else. So that's just kind of my non-traditional advice here.
I would like to add into that one as well, just because honestly, I agree 100% with what Natalie just said. And in my case, even though I was already in my respective field, right, and I was already pretty well accomplished chef, the accounting degree did help me because I understood how money was moving around, especially in the restaurant industry, trying to understand. There was a question in my head, is like, why do so many restaurants fail within the second year of their lifeline, right? And a lot of that came from the accounting degree and the understanding that they just are not financially structured right? They don't know how to prep themselves for the long haul. it wasn't until I went into my controllership class that Professor Peter, he's the one that convinced me to go into grad school, but he said, don't pay for it. My employer, luckily enough, did offer incentives to go to grad school that I went to. Not only that, but they offered additional money, right, if you had the GPA. So all in all, right, they were able to give me literally a master's for free. And take advantage of that, especially if you're not if you're trying to get into any particular field, like say the finance field. There are employers out there that will pay for this, pay for your let's say your master's, maybe your Series 65 or anything like that that you're wanting to go into like particular finance, right? Don't disregard that. There are people and employers out there that will pay for it because they're willing to make that investment in you. You just got to make sure that you apply yourself and give that return back. Remember, what comes around goes around.
And so for as we're talking about grad school, a follow-up question too is like anyone, it's so far it sounds like everyone was working. Did anyone not work during grad school? Did everyone kind of work during grad school?
In my case, yeah, I was still doing the 40, 50-hour work weeks. The only thing that helped me was in my particular, when I went to grad school, because I had done the accounting degree in undergrad, I was able to shave off a few classes. So it kind of helped with like an extra, 4 months. So it just made it just that much quicker. And you save quite a bit of money too. So it doesn't hurt.
Nice.
Beth, I see that question that you're referring to. I see that Maya asked during your time in grad school, were you working or completing an internship? If so, how did that influence your path to your current job? And I think that is a terrific question to ask. One that at least from my perspective, was precisely how I ended up in my position. So I'm going to give a shout out to the Career Center's one of the Career Center's programs, one of the software that they use called Handshake. Handshake is a very good networking application, networking software that you can sign up. It's kind of like LinkedIn. However, the advantage and the differentiator of Handshake versus something like LinkedIn is that the talent pool is much smaller than the vast network of LinkedIn. So what does that mean? That converts to a recruiter or a hiring manager seeing your profile and application and resume much more directly than receiving 200 applications on LinkedIn, for example. So I strongly encourage you to seriously consider looking into the Career Center's program called Handshake. In my case, that's precisely what ended up happening. I went into grad school, completed the MBA at Cal Poly, and throughout my time in the MBA program, I aggressively began applying to various careers that I felt were of tremendous interest to me through Handshake. I very easily noticed that recruiters were much more they're much more willing to reply at a much higher consistency than something like Indeed or LinkedIn. So once again, the key here, and I want to emphasize this so strongly, is that Handshake is such a terrific software to be a part of. So yes, I was a full-time student. I was taking courses during the evening. I was working full-time as well. So I essentially had no time to do anything other than to work, as well as complete my academic career. But that's exactly the path that I was at in my life. And I knew that these were the sacrifices that were most valuable for me at that time. And they ended up paying tremendous dividends. So I received an internship at the Fed through Handshake. I was able to connect to one of the recruiters, and I set a very individual message to the recruiter, a highly targeted message that connected exactly who I am to the position that was being offered and related it to the interests of the recruiter. So I think being targeted over sending 200 generic messages will likely serve students much better. I don't know how successful one is going to be sending up numerous generic messages to everybody. I think the key here in this case is to be highly specific and intentional and also pursuing the recruiter as well. So it was a full-time career. It was an internship as a full-time job and full-time studies at that time.
Thanks, Albert. Yeah, and I see some responses too in the chat for folks who are kind of following along with the questions regarding grad school. So we've got another follow-up question or a question from the chat. Like, how do you recommend going about asking your employers for the opportunity for them to pay for grad school? Also, the company that paid for your grad school, did the length of time that you were employed with them influence their decision?
I'm gonna go ahead and just chime in on that one. Okay. I'm gonna add up back to the internship part, and just say that, a lot of, if you do your research, you'll notice that a lot of grad schools now are offering some kind of internship as well, right? With maybe some corporations that they're working directly with. So, like, for example, the University of Redlands, since Esri is a big GIS contributor, and they work hand in hand with them, they do internships with them. So depending on who you go with, you might get lucky, right? Now, regarding to this particular question, let's see, how do you go about asking the employers for the opportunity to pay? Now, honestly, it's just as simple as going up to HR and saying, hey, do you guys offer any incentives for going to grad school, or do you do any sponsorships? Believe it or not, 9 times out of 10, you'll find out that they have some kind of scholarship going on. In my particular uh, organization, they offer multiple scholarship opportunities. Now, not just for the actual employee, right, but actually for my dependents as well. Now, the only criteria, right, is how long I've been with the company. Was I just had to pass probation. That's all it was. And then I could start taking advantage of that. So as soon as I had passed probation, I was like, okay, guys, I'm going to start applying for this. And sure enough, all they really wanted to know is, what classes are you taking? Can you meet the GPA standards? Right. And they wanted a expense report. That's all it is. Right. And I'm happy because in my organization, they're very generous. So there's no real cap besides $10,000 per year. So if you play it right, you can really just extend it towards that third year and get that extra. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to, work the system or anything like that, but you can actually, play it out to your advantage, where you can walk out with an MBA at zero.
Definitely work the system. Work the system if you can. Student debt is not the thing. But yeah, that definitely, I would say with the larger companies, most of them do have some sort of tuition reimbursement program. They all vary on how much they will reimburse. Some are, career specific, like with the employer that I got my grad degree, they would pay for one bachelor's, one master's, one PhD, but they would not pay for a JD. And so, it had to be kind of career centric or specific. So MBA, you can argue different ways, right? So I definitely agree with what Giovanni was saying is do your research. I did work for a smaller company before I went to a larger company. And even for undergrad, they're like, we'll pay for your undergrad if you want to do food science, because it was the food and beverage industry. And I was like, that is not my jam. I don't like math. Not great at science, so maybe not. But if you're flexible to that and you're really committed and close to a smaller company, It might be as easy as just bringing it and just giving them a value proposition of how this can benefit them if they pay for your, degree, and how you can contribute and help take them to the next level. So.
I'm gonna add on to that just a little bit more. One thing that I learned actually from uh, my associates, right, was when there was a teacher that actually showed us how to go and research scholarships. Now, it was a simple Google search, right? Now, when it came to graduate scholarships, now there were fewer, but they were more generous, right? And that's something that I think most people are not really taking advantage of, because I think I'm not sure if it's because it's the amount of work you have to do to try to find one, but they are there and they are very generous. Now, if you try, because especially when you're majoring in a specific field, that institution might actually offer an incentive. You never know. Especially like if you're going into tax or tax law or something like that, there are generous donors out there. You never know. It's just got to do the research to find that money.
Yeah, and what I feel like I hear everyone talking about is kind of just like the way we're saying, take advantage of all the resources and benefits of going to Cal Poly Pomona. Take advantage of all the benefits at your company. Find out everything they give you money for, everything they do matches for, like make use of that. So many companies do like tuition reimbursements, pay for school. They'll pay for, all the great benefits like workout, I'm trying to think of what they fall into, but like workout,
Health and wellness
and
benefits.
thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's yeah. If you're
Like your
looking up,
annual gym
yeah.
membership and things like that. I got that to pay for like something on my Switch one time, like because it was like a workout like resource. But I mean, take advantage of all those things because those are resources your company is making available to you. Like they'll let you know for something isn't within scope, but like use all of those things. Um, so that's great. So as we're waiting for some more questions coming in, I do have another question from the questions that were sent ahead of time, just about this job market, y'all. Okay, this feels like a very challenging job market. I've got descriptors here of haywire and that it is a jungle out there. What advice do we have for folks who are just trying to find a job? I feel like Albert did a great job of tapping on the idea of like find places where you're going to get traction, maybe where there isn't quite as much like volume, but like what other suggestions do we have for folks?
I think going back to like what has been pretty consistent throughout the panel is always have a plan B and use your network to the most of the abilities that you have. Also tap into those mentorship programs. I know that specific person that talked about that career opportunity for Northrop Grumman, he then became my mentor. So just linking up with alumni are very receptive to helping out. We always are happy to review resumes, but it has to be done also in a respectful way. You can't just straight up say, hey, I need a job. You have to be respectful in the way you approach people, but definitely tapping into that alumni and always being flexible to pivot